when we talk about support, we're not just talking about making crisis calls. Reaching out when you're hurting and you're feeling really vulnerable is strength, not weakness, even though we've learned the opposite.
Bill Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, wrote in 1952, "If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root some unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand." Wilson suggested that if we could identify and continually surrender these unrealistic and unrealizable demands, that we may then be able to accomplish what he imagined to be the recovery's next frontier, something he called emotional sobriety. Flash forward 70 years and join psychotherapists and best-selling authors Tom Rutledge and Dr. Alan Berger, who have taken up the mantle of exploring Bill Wilson's new frontier. Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
Welcome to Emotional Sobriety, the podcast. I'm Tom Rutledge, and with me is our wonderful producer, Patrick Newman, and Mr. 50. It's like 50 years sober, Alan Berger. Is that right?
Today is my anniversary.
50, half a century.
Started in August in 1971, my journey in recovery.
Wow. Hi, Cece.
Oh,
good morning.
Nice chest hug on Daddy.
That's sweet. 50, man, that is, that's halfway to 100, buddy.
That's halfway to 100. So halfway there. So I got to start the day off. Listen to this, you guys.
Yeah.
I was invited to speak at an emotional sobriety Zoom meeting that started in September of last year.
Yeah.
In Scotland. So I was on the Zoom meeting with 150 people from Europe this morning, a few people from the United States, and they're all there to learn about emotional sobriety. What?
Can I have candy?
Yeah, you can have this candy. There you go.
All right.
So 150 people, I got to start the day off by celebrating, and I was telling Patrick. And yesterday, I went to this meeting that I spoke at when I first moved out here in Lambertville, New Jersey, and my sponsor, Tom, spoke there, and he gave me my cake yesterday.
Oh, man.
He was there 50 years ago with me, and he's here today. In fact, that he was out with his buddy Paul, who's here from Hawaii, to give him a hand, and they're laying the floor for a gazebo in the backyard. It's so cool.
Yeah, I was saying something about that on Facebook. I saw that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's so cool. So look, man, here I am. I get to be with you guys, two men that I love a lot, with a lot of other people I love, and little Cecilia here, taking my candy and sneaking around in the room. And my God, man, it's like, what a gift this recovery has been. And, as I was reflecting on it today, and even Tom shared yesterday, I celebrate 50 years, but it's not to say that it's just been easy, because there are moments there's been nothing easy about it. And I love what our other friend Tom said. I've got a lot of Toms in my life.
You do have a lot of Toms.
He said, sometimes sobriety is about staying clean and sober when it makes more sense to get high.
Yeah.
Sometimes sobriety, and I'll tell you, I know what that means. I resonate to that deeply, because even, in my 20s, and when I had I've talked to you about it a bit, Tom, and I think Patrick might know some about it. I had a nuclear meltdown, man. I threw my life up. I created a lot of pain and a lot of anxiety and a lot of trauma for myself and other people I love and care about. And, working through that and showing up and digesting that experience and asking for help, because I know that's one of the things you wanted to focus on today.
Yeah.
Is, one of the things that happened at that point in my recovery was I stopped taking care of myself. I stopped reaching out and asking for help. I stopped doing my own work. And maybe it was an unconscious thing or whatever, but I got so involved in my practice and helping other people, I forgot what's the golden rule here, right? Sharpen the saw. If you're going to keep sawing, you better use a sharp saw. It saws a lot better if all the teeth are sharpened, right? Well,
Right.
I was as dull as could be. I wasn't sharpening my saw at all, man. I was working 12-hour days. I wasn't taking the time to exercise. I wasn't eating great. I mean, there were so many things. I stopped attending meetings. I thank God I didn't drink during that time. But I really, really created an incredible personal crisis in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to digest it, learn from it, process it, wake up sometimes in the morning, in a panic attack, laying in a pool of sweat, wondering how is this going to all work out? And I had no idea. Once again,
Right.
when you're in the middle of something like that, I had no idea what the outcome would be. And I know today that the work I did at that point helped me deal with some of my trauma in my childhood that I didn't address. It helped me understand myself more than I've ever understood myself. And it helped me become such a better person and therapist and author. Because I really, somebody once said, Dr. Berger's writing is like turning over the rocks and looking at the little roly-polies that exist underneath the rocks, right? And I swear that was what I did at that point in my life. It's like I started turning rocks over and looking at what was underneath them. And there were a lot of little creatures in there that were moving around that I hadn't been addressing, that I hadn't been talking about, and that I hadn't. And, and I think this is such an important topic. You don't need to light a fire and melt everything down in your life to get to that point. Don't follow Dr. Berger's lead on this one. You can learn to start asking for help beforehand. But I'll tell you, one of the things I didn't address, Tom, is that what we've been addressing on the Thursday nights is my self-hate. I believe my self-hate limited my response to caring for myself.
Right.
And that,
it's so normalized in its many forms. I mean, because sometimes I think one of the things you've done a good job with the self-hate on Thursday night is helping to show all the different forms that it can take. And maybe we can even talk about that some more there because it's not just always, everybody doesn't, I always talk about that because I've discovered blatant self-hatred in me in my recovery. It's in a weird way. I'm fortunate in that way because it was very obvious. It was like, I'm not fortunate to have it. I was fortunate that it was so clear, but it can be so subtle, and it can be, and the reason we don't go all the way there is because it is our norm. We have normalized it. It is, and we actually, more people than not, in my experience working with that, see that as their motivation. When you start talking about saying and what about if we change this self-hatred, this self-condemnation? And what people do is I'll ask them, what scares you about that? And they'll, and I know what scares them because I remember, my should monster saying to me over and over again, if you don't have me, to light a fire under your ass or hang a carrot in front of your face, you're not even going to get out of bed in the morning. And it's like, and that would scare the crap out of me because people, and so the idea of saying we have a better, I say, yes, that will motivate you. But it's like a really dirty fuel, it's going to ruin your engine. It's like there are better ways to motivate. There are better ways. And it's really a hard thing and really scary. And connected to that, one of the things I want to say to people listening is as we talk about this stuff, as especially I think as you and I, as old guys here, it's want people to know the best insights are hindsight. They come in hindsight. We don't know. When we talk about this stuff of like, when I worked on this in therapy, when I tell a story about how I became enlightened in working in therapy, or so often I talk about my couples therapy and how much this couples therapist helped me to wake up to how to be a better man, how to be a better husband. It's like, I didn't know that was happening at the time. More times than not, that therapist died during the COVID years. She wasn't COVID, she died from, but she had been ill for a while. And I got to talk to her daughter, And I told her just how much Mary Elizabeth had helped me to be a better person. And I also said to her, and I was mad at her most of the time, because I wasn't celebrating the wisdom I was collecting in those moments. I was in the thick of it. It's like I was, I couldn't see the big picture from where I was. And so I want people to know that for you, like when you're talking about going through those hard times, and being grateful that you made it through, and that you didn't pick up, you didn't drink, you didn't use. We can celebrate the miracle of that, and hope and learn the lessons, but know that there's no way that you are necessarily going to know what you're learning while you're learning it.
I could have never, even with the background and training I've had, I could have never forecasted the issues that would have surfaced through that whole process.
Right.
I mean, I would have never been able to put my finger on the points in terms of these are going to be some of the themes that are going to show up in the work you're doing. And what you're saying is very important, is that that if you can find a way to have faith in the process, and at those moments where they seem to be the darkest of the dark, right? And where you feel like no light's ever going to shine through again, if you could just find a way to put one foot in front of that other and walk through that.
What you're describing is you can't do it without other people. And it's not just one other person, but you can't do it without other people's perspective. And that doesn't always come in the form of people saying, let me give you this feedback, or I need to ask you for this feedback. Sometimes it comes in that form, but just being in a support system, being people that you are getting to know, that you are letting in, that you are both, it's reciprocal, that you're being helpful to, and being helped by them. It's in relationships like we have even now. If we took a pop test and said, okay, what has Alan Berger helped you learn as through the last year and a half, as you've worked with each other so often, those things just emerge from the relationship. When we talk about support, we're not just talking about making crisis calls. Reaching out when you're hurting and you're feeling really vulnerable is strength, not weakness, even though we've learned the opposite. And we want that stuff too. But we want to know, and that's one of the things I love about, and I hope that anybody who's listening who finds something to connect with here, if you haven't already, join us on the Thursday meeting, because it's such a good example of I think there's just so many examples of connection there. I mean, certainly that I have gotten. I was texting this morning with Roger, made a new friend. I love the idea that I'm 67 making new friends. I've just learned some things from him, and we sometimes it's just about, like you and I do, where we banter.
But look, what you're bringing up here is something you're really, illuminating something that I think is important. Is help also comes in having relationships with people, and in being willing to have that connection, allow that connection to influence you.
Yes.
You see, it's such a subtle thing and a nuance about being helped, is letting yourself be open to an experience with someone, to let them matter in your life. And it's so, I think what you're saying, it's got so much importance here, because you're right. Everybody focuses on that time when you're in major crisis, right? I mean, even when I look back at that period of time that I was now heading for, I was on my Titanic and heading for the iceberg. I didn't have anybody on board the ship. I mean, I played tennis with my good buddy Damien, and Roger was in my life, but I didn't talk to Roger very personally about anything. We would talk about a client and stuff like that. Didn't open up any personal issues at all. In fact, my buddy Russ, who I played music with, he says, Al, I'm so glad you're having this trouble. And I go, thanks, Russ. What the hell do you mean by that? He said, because you never let me help you. You never talked to me about what was going on in your life, and now you're open to being to my input, to my love for you and my caring for you, and I never experienced that before. So what you're saying, Tom, has so much wisdom. Is there a way, and for our listeners to pay attention to this, is a way that you're living your life right now where you, even though you've got people around you, you're isolating yourself. You're keeping.
That's a really good point, that basically just because you're in touch with people does not mean you're not isolating. And the other point I want to say, because I just jotted it down too, is just let pain be a motivator. But we have a long history of developing great coping skills so that we know a lot about how to escape pain as fast as possible, through whatever addictive process we're involved in. And so the idea, and of course, it always seems insane when we get involved with, when we first get involved in and or people now get involved with us, and we are saying, it's okay to feel, just sit, basically sit with that pain, see what that is about, write about it, let's talk about it again later, that kind of stuff. We're in no hurry. We're not suggesting, oh my God, you're in pain, we got to get you out of there right away. It's like, it's really counterintuitive, but it's like what you're talking about there is, without that pain, and it's not the only thing that dissatisfaction is what begins motivation, but pain is a very powerful form of that. And if we will let it be, if we think about that, reframe it consciously, put a note up in on your bathroom mirror that says that pain can be a motivator. Let pain be a motivator. And it's like, not just to get out of the pain, but to see what you can learn, and how you can not just feel better, but be better.
Yeah, well, listen, that part is really important. And I'll tell you, man, you just opened up another dimension out today. While the pain can be a motivator, it can help us grow. If we can make ourselves available to our relationships, they can also be a source of that growth without even the pain. I was just thinking is that if I am totally present in a relationship, and I can use my relationship with you, with Patrick,
Mm-hmm.
Roger, with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people that are in my life today, with Tom, my sponsor,
Mm-hmm.
there's two components to that presence that makes the relationship, I think, of value. One is to be accessible, meaning allow what you say to me to matter in my life and to influence me,
Mm-hmm.
to take it in, to look at it. What is the relevance? How does what you're saying reverberate within my soul? What meaning? And like you said, if you and I look at our relationship over here, I can make that same list you could make. I can
Mm-hmm.
make a list on how you've helped
Mm-hmm.
me,
Mm-hmm.
both directly and indirectly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, times when I've turned to you for some advice, for
Mm-hmm.
some counsel and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
but also just in our rapping together, I walk away with stuff that makes me more than I am before we have the interaction. So
Right.
being willing to be impacted by what you're saying, allow you to have access to me by opening that door, and it's being willing to express what that means to me. See,
Yes.
that's the other side of it, is acknowledging it and having a dialogue sometimes about it, like we do. So it's so interesting that that's the other form of change, is just through the natural value of a relationship, like you were
Oh,
saying.
now, okay, now we're like having this little pinball insight thing going on here now, because when you said that, I just realized people often will at least for a little while, misunderstand that we're saying to them, don't care what people think, don't care what people say. It's like, and we're not saying that. It's like what we are saying is, you don't need to care what everybody thinks at the same level. I don't, it's like where I used to be. This is maybe a difference, but if the person at the grocery store in aisle 4 didn't seem to like me, that could ruin my day as much as if my wife was upset with me. It's like, I didn't have any. There was no gradation there. So we are saying some of that, but most importantly, we're talking about doing what you call, this is one of the things I've learned from you, is this the way of phrasing it, holding on to ourselves. And so as we don't take things personally in the way that we have before, when we are actually able to, and I use my little nutshell that says, I respect your opinion, I trust my judgment, so that basically your opinion matters to me, but it's not ultimately going to be what I'm, and I may decide exactly on what you said if you give me a thought, but at that point it becomes mine. is because, oh, I got that from Alan, but he told me about that and that really fit. See, that's what I'm always asking people to do. And I've heard you say the same thing, is try that. Well, we're putting it in our new book, try it on, put it on. It's like, this is very, very subjective in the sense of, there's a lot of general knowledge here, but specifically how each of these little bits of wisdom fit is very personal. And the idea is, the stronger I feel as a person, the more I can hold on to myself, as you say, then I'm more open to letting myself be influenced with what you're saying, which really makes me, it scares us. So it'll make us feel like we may feel more vulnerable, but this is the case where we want to let people know that vulnerability is not weakness, which is what most of us have learned in one form or another. Vulnerability and knowing how and where to express that, not to everybody, but vulnerability to knowing how and where to express it, which is that support system, is tremendous courage. It's a demonstration of tremendous courage and tremendous strength.
Alan, when you had that kind of winter of the soul, when you weren't present in your relationships and you were in a crowded room and you were still alone, like what did that process look like for you becoming more present in those relationships? And was there like a conscious decision you made to kind of like reinsert yourself emotionally? And
I made some decisions to cross some boundaries that ended up really being disastrous. And I ended up in a lot of pain with a lot of anxiety. And it was the dark night of the soul for me. Mm-hmm. I mean, I really fell into a very, very dark place for God. It had to be almost a year. Mm-hmm. And I ended up going back to therapy. I ended up doing a lot of work. I was probably in therapy 3, sometimes 4 days a week. I went to a lot of workshops. I went to on-site. I did some work in on-site for a week on this living with balance in your life. I went to some professional boundary workshops. I mean, I dug into what had happened in a way that I had never dug into before. Yeah. And, it was tough. It was painful. It was difficult. I went to Hawaii and I spent, I think, 2 weeks in Hawaii with my sponsor, Tom, and redid a 4th step and a 5th step and took an inventory of my relationship at that point with my wife, and to see what I could learn in terms of what was missing. And I'll tell you, man, all the themes that were starting to reveal themselves were showing up in whatever I was doing. The themes that were really causing me trouble were being starkly revealed through the pain I was in.
Right.
Today, now, what this conversation has is that the relationships I have with people are so much more open. I can share what's going on with me, talk about what's going on, be more transparent of what's going on, and not feel like I've got to somehow present this thing like Dr. Berger's got all his shit together.
Is that what you mean by integrated?
Yes, I think that my life is so much more integrated at this point in time, which is a theme, right, that comes up in 12 Essential Insights a lot. And how do we deal with all of those different forces in us? And it's like, I didn't want to acknowledge them. First of all, I wanted my life to be easy and simple. Oh my God, if I just think it out, I will be. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
I think therefore I am just didn't work for me. I mean, I was a legend in my own mind, but not in reality, right?
Right. Well, but there's a I'm a fan. You can't not be a fan of paradox when it comes to recovery. It's beginning with the first step of, if you want to experience power, admit powerlessness. It's like, it goes on and on. But the idea of, I want my life to be simple. It's like, this is where that we what we talk about is, I refer to it as the myth of singularity. It's like your life is not going to be, if it feels simple, it's not going to stay that way. If you are absolutely not having an accurate view of yourself, like you were talking about. It's like, and the truth is, as we sit here now, and I'm with you. It's like I have a belief that I can be very grateful for things in my life right this moment. And I definitely have a guy on my committee that his job is to sit there, and he's not a naysayer. He's not a negative guy. He's just somebody. He's the realist. And he says, what we are not beyond that. Tough things can happen. And and the reason we're less likely to go into the dark night of the soul is because we're so much faster at responding. And by the way, because of support, maybe this is one of the bigger points we could make for people listening about support, because we're in constant contact, continual contact with people. It's like, I can't slip that far away without somebody asking me, what's up with you? And it's not your responsibility to do that. It's not your job to do that, but you will do that. If I'm coming in here every time and just being aloof or being, or if I'm not trying to cause trouble by making jokes, one of you guys is going to say, Tom, what's wrong with you? And and maybe the first time I'll say nothing is okay. And then, but that's going to stick with me, and however that goes. But the idea is, as long as we're in relationships that are real, then we have mirrors in our lives. We have things reflecting ourselves back as we are.
So that's an interesting thing. I think one way of measuring our commitment to ourselves is to look at who do we surround our life with.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, who is in my hula hoop, so to speak, that I'm letting
right.
my world? I mean, like, who are the people that I'm interacting with? What's the quality of their lives like? Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's so interesting how that can reflect my commitment to myself, my relationship with myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because, right now, when I look at where I was, and this all went down in 2004 for me. So that was, what's that, 17 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look back at where I was at that point in time, nobody was in the hula hoop with me. I was in the hula hoop alone. That was it, man. Everybody else was on the outside. I had some people outside that hula hoop, but I didn't let anybody inside that inner circle,
Mm-hmm.
right? There was no one in that inner circle. Today, when I look, you're in the inner circle, Patrick's in my inner circle, Roger's in my inner circle.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the people in the Thursday night meeting, I've let Tom Potash is now moved into that inner circle mall.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick, Kathy, there's a bunch of people that have started that circle. First of all, has gotten a lot bigger.
Mm-hmm.
I let into that, and
Mm-hmm.
there's still, there's concentric rings. Some people are in the inner circle.
Yeah.
Then there's other ones.
I love that image. I use it with people all the time, where because I like to draw on the blackboard, and now that I'm back at the office, sometimes I get to draw on my blackboard. But it's that concentric circles for relationships. The idea of in helping people realize that because it's a beautiful way of helping people realize your expectations of them and of yourself differ depending on where they are in those circles. I don't have to keep every relationship I have crystal clear, but there are the ones that are in closer in those closer to the center circles. And it's starting with my wife. It's like that those need to be. I think I tell people it's like there's a pipeline between us, and how clean do we have to have that? It's like well, the closest ones we keep it really clean because it can be a real problem. But the other thing is we could know somebody. I know a couple of people that basically, if somebody's going to have a party and I'll say, hey, well, so and so going to be there because they're fun. It's like, they're one guy I'm thinking of in particular is narcissistic as the day is long, and I wouldn't bring a personal problem to him if I needed to, but I like him. He's not a malignant narcissist. He's just a very selfish, focused person, but he's hilarious. He's fun and he's kind, and so I like him. That's perfectly good for that expectation of that relationship.
So now I'm imagining all your friends that are listening to this podcast are going, God, is he talking about me? Is he talking about me?
And I'll tell you, I'll answer that now. Yes, I am.
No, but what I was going to say, if you're even able to consider that he's not talking about you, you're not.
That's right. That's exactly right. Right.
I mean, it's a narcissist that, oh no, he couldn't be talking about me.
Right. Right. No, that's true. That what you'd be doing is going like, oh, I know. Now you might
I
be
know
going,
who
I
that
know
guy
who he's
is.
talking about.
That's the narcissist.
So Tom, when you're parsing, you made the distinction between an opinion from somebody else and then your own judgment. When you get an opinion that fucks with you and really starts to either give you these feelings of anger or self-loathing, are there any insights you've come to over the years of like walking yourself back from that ledge and kind of like deferring to your own judgment? And I guess the part of the side of the coin that's leaving what's not helpful rather than absorbing what is.
Oh, because I love that's one of the slogans in AA I love so much. Take what's helpful, leave what's not. Well, the first step is just, and hold me to the fire here if I'm missing the best answers. But it's, the first thing I do is what I've eventually began to do with my clients, which is after I am aware of the opinion, whether that actually it's the same thing, whether it comes from somebody on the outside or somebody who is my own inner saboteur. If you say something to me, Patrick, that is very direct and negative, it feels bad to me, then one of the first things I want to do actually myself is ask myself the question, okay, what do you think, Tom? Because that's a lot of times what we don't do. We don't say, what is my opinion? One of the other thing is I very often, if somebody says something, now I don't like anybody, especially somebody I care about. If you're upset with me about something, or if you don't like, you're telling me there's something about me you don't like, it's like I'm not going to, to me, emotional sobriety doesn't mean I'm not going to give a shit. It's like I'm going to be, I'm going to be at least disappointed that that's the case, even if I decide I don't think I don't think there's something here that I need to change for myself. But more times than not, if something is very sensitive to me, there's probably something for me to look at. It's like, if the idea is if people say something or I hear something or I interpret something that feels insulting to me in some way, it's like I'm not going to feel insulted by things that I don't have any problems with. It's like if it's something that if you make a reference, just maybe off the mark, but if you make a reference, and how much how slow I am, how procrastinating I am, how disorganized I am, it's like, because I mean I will respond to that stuff because I want to get along in the world, but it's like I'm not going to take any of that stuff personally. It's not going to hurt me because I don't have any of my self-esteem invested in that. It's like, now, but if I get the feeling that you see me as somebody who doesn't care, or if you feel like if you said something that made me think that you feel neglected by me or disrespected by me and stuff like that, then I would want to do more than just what I think. But because you're a credible person in my life, then I would want to say, okay, I need to take a look at that, and maybe need to have that conversation first with you, but maybe I would even need to have it with somebody else. I mean, sometimes if I'm having trouble sorting through, that would be where we go to our theme today, which is get somebody else, get a consultant in there, somebody that I can bounce this off of. And it can, I had somebody do that with me just yesterday, call me and just ask me about something, and she ran it through, and I think it was very helpful to her. And I've been on the other side of that too. And I was just going like, this is what I hear. This is what I think is going on. And it wasn't a matter of like, she gave me the authority. It's what I said rang true for her. So she was able to take that on and decide what to do next with it. So hopefully whatever thing if this was between you and me, if I needed to run it past somebody else, I could do that. But since my relationship with you is important, it would culminate almost always, I think, in my practice, of me talking with you directly about it. That's a long answer. So I don't know if it was what you were looking for.
I think the first step of consulting yourself and getting to the bottom of, at least as a starting point, what your opinion is about the issue at hand is a good way to get the ball rolling towards somewhere positive.
And one thing, yeah, and thank you, because that helps me kind of flesh that out a little bit more. And because what's different in recovery and emotional sobriety is that we actually proactively look for what might be right about a criticism or something that feels negative. We don't necessarily, in the old days, I might have either defensively just shut it out altogether, fuck you, or I might have just accepted it to, fuck me, that it's like that. But neither one of those, both of those are coping mechanisms. One is to turn on myself, one is to turn on you. It's like, but that's interesting. I appreciate you saying that, because that is something that I definitely had to learn to do. And I wouldn't want listeners who haven't done it before to think that, if you don't have a very strong recovery voice at this point in your process, that's what you're going to develop that for, because that voice is going to be there, because that's the one that's going to help us get out of trouble. That's the one that when Alan was talking about his dark night of the soul year, he had a recovery voice in there, and Alan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like, and that voice took the advice and the guidance and the feedback from other people, and you took action.
Yes, that's right.
And that's your recovery voice. Anybody, this is where I always want to say, anybody can have a good day on a good day, man. It's like this is where positive opportunism comes in. We're gonna, if you're having a hard time, go back to the pain kind of thing. It's like, if you're having a hard time, look for what you can learn. What can I learn from this? And most importantly, what can I learn about me?
The point there, Tom, and that I think I just want to underscore, is I think when our curiosity exceeds our need to protect our ego,
Yes,
things start
perfect.
to really shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before, if I'm defending an image of myself that I have to be this way to be okay, and it goes back to, where did I put my emotional center of gravity? Well, if I put it in an image or a reputation or whatever it is, then I've got to have that, or else it threatens who I am. If I let go of that, as you said, if I become more interested and curious, and hey, is there anything of value here? Now, the way I've said it is, I'm letting the best of me run the show instead of my ego. This is my recovery voice, my commitment to being, as we've been talking about Thursday nights, my commitment to developing the best possible attitude I can have towards my life. And that is to weigh feedback, sift through it, take what fits, and let go of the rest.
It's interesting. You've just introduced me to another version of a committee member for myself. I've realized, he's not new. I just realized I've just kind of named him. Is I still have, all these years later, into my recovery. This is the good side of procrastination. I always say, like, I have so far procrastinated my next drink for 35 years. It's like I just haven't gotten around to it, one day at a time, which is, somebody pointed out to me, said that is the appropriate use of, that's what one day at a time is appropriate use of procrastination. It's like, but the idea is I still have the guys on my committee, and one of them, I think you and I may have talked about this in some version recently. It's like, is I have this guy that is just a reflex excuse maker.
Yes.
And he starts making up stories immediately when I heard from our friend Michael McGee this morning, and I had warned him that I'm writing an endorsement for his new book, and it's like, and he's very organized, unlike me, and I asked him for a deadline, and he well, this is actually a good story to develop, to show how this works. It's like I asked him for a deadline. He didn't need a deadline. But I do, because if I'm like toothpaste, if you don't squeeze me, nothing happens. It's like, so he said, how about the end of this month? And it was July. That's why I texted you and asked you if you'd done yours, because I needed extra motivation. I figured you had, and that'll light a fire for me. It's like, and so end of the month was yesterday. So today I knew I had it on my book to do. I got to write that. It's he emailed me and just very kindly said, just checking in with you, see how that's going. And I wrote him back and said, it's like, well, today I'm a day late from the deadline, so that means I will get it done now. It's like, and that's just the truth about me. But before that, the first guy that spoke, as soon as I saw his email, was the little story maker, well, it was I think my dog got hurt, or I twisted, I fell in the duck pond again.
I never saw it. Or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, oh man, I'm so sorry. It's but it's amazing to me that it's like I'm able to for most part look at that guy with what I call the quiet defiance, where it's like he speaks and says, okay, tell him this, and it's and you guys have this guy, I'm sure you do. It's like
yeah, I still have to deal with them in recovery.
Yeah, they're fully formed subjects. I mean, fully formed stories immediately. These guys are, if we could, as writers, for instance, all three of us are writers, if we could tap into that kind of creativity, it's like, I mean, this takes them that long to write a story, and they have all the details. And so I try to greet them with what I call quiet defiance, which is you imagine somebody just start talking to you, sitting to my right, and I just stop for a moment and just look over at them, and then go back to what I was doing, just sort of just like, okay, now what were we talking about? Because I want people to know too, when they hear about all these guys we're talking about in our heads, is that they don't go away, but we change our relationship with them. I always imagine my alcoholism. I call him Tequila Boy, sitting in the corner with it's interesting that your sponsor Tom is from Hawaii, because I always picture him in a Hawaiian shirt with a Hawaiian lei around his neck, and an empty martini glass. He always wants me to fill his glass, but I haven't done it. I told you guys about my old friend Wellfelt on a podcast in the past where we were drunk one night, and he said he had seen Don Ho in Hawaii, and I talked him into flying me over and going to see Don Ho. Don Ho was drunker than we were. And it turned out that Kevin, who co-wrote our theme song for Start Right Here, you said very well might have been in the band that night with Don Ho.
I wanted to bring up something that we were talking about, Alan, before we begun recording. This idea that emotional sobriety, we're not selling happiness necessarily.
I think the way to think about it, Patrick, and I'm glad you circled back to that before we end today, is what emotional sobriety about, my whole new book about, is how do we achieve that emotional freedom? What do we have to do so that our response to ourselves, to our relationships, to life, especially when we don't live up to our expectations, or somebody else doesn't, or life doesn't, how do we best respond to those situations? As Tom said, when everything's going my way, I'm fine. Right? It's those moments, as soon as now I'm at cross purposes with reality. Reality is not what I think it's supposed to be, or you're not who I think you're supposed to be, or I'm not who I think I should be. Mm-hmm. What do I do? How do I meet those things? And I see emotional sobriety as getting aligned with the reality. And in that alignment comes our freedom. Big part of this was talked about in AA as acceptance, which I buy it. I don't buy the way acceptance, and we'll get into this because it's coming in one of the chapters that we're going to be digging into. Mm-hmm. I don't buy the way that acceptance has been talked about in the mainstream in AA on page 417, and we'll go into that later. There's a part of that, the first part of it, I totally agree with. Life is as it is, right? Reality is what reality is. That part I buy. But that everything is perfect in God's world is where I have trouble with using that idea to cope with reality. So we'll get into that. And I'm not, I don't want to come across as counterculture to anyone in terms of this idea and stuff. If that works for you, keep using it. Go right ahead. I've had problems with that. There's limitations to that philosophy that I've struggled with. So for me, freedom is something that sets me free to respond in the best possible way to any situation I'm in. That's the freedom I'm looking for, so that I can digest, as Tom was saying earlier, whatever task life sets in front of me, I can find a way to meet it and digest it and take from it that which is going to grow me and leave the rest behind. See, it's that process. I almost think about it as that in some way we learn how to chew up life and digest it better. I mean, if we relate it to the biological process of digestion, We got to chew things up well. I'm not great at this, man. I swallow my food. I don't think I chew anything. Quick story about that. So in boot camp, right? So, you're physically probably training at least 8 hours a day. And I'm talking about major efforts being put out. I'm probably burning, thousands of calories every day. So we line up our platoon, we're all having to stand at attention, no talking, and we go into the mess hall, and we've got our trays, and our food is put on our trays, no talking. It's all silence now. Mm-hmm. You go and you lay your tray in front of the table. Everybody's standing. As soon as everybody's served, then the drill instructor says, ready, sit. And everybody sits down, ready, eat. And you start eating. If anybody says a word, everybody has to stand up and leave. And you cannot touch another bite on your plate. Now, when we hit the mess hall, I'm starving. I'm famished. So when they say ready, eat, it's almost like a game show. How much food can you get in your mouth? Because some idiot's going to say something like, God damn it, this stuff sucks, right? They're going to say something like that. And usually, if you're lucky, you've got a 5-minute window. Sometimes it was less than a minute. So as soon as he says ready to eat, my face is in the plate and I'm going, I'm trying to get as much food in my mouth and swallow as much as I can because I don't know if I'm going to have 5 minutes or a minute. And that behavior has persisted into my adulthood. My kids look at me and say, Dad, nobody's going to tell you to get up and eat here. Get up and stop eating.
That's
There's
right.
no drill instructor in the room.
That's great. Now, Patrick, and anybody who's young, who's listening to this, I would say this. I just realized too, Alan, tell me if this is true. And I know we got to wrap up here, but it's like one of the guys we have on our committee, and when we were old guys, is the guy who's just in charge of telling stories about our past. Yes. And we have a whole lot of them that we believe that we want to tell, and that we like to tell. They're good stories. And so one of the things that happens, it's really hard. Imagine how often and both of us have done that today, where we stop and say, "Let me tell you this story." It's like. But I want everybody to know that Alan and I both have a very good gatekeeper in our heads who every single one of these conversations probably says no to a dozen stories that show up for us to tell. Right, Alan? It's like, oh, you know what this is? It's like, no, I'm working. I'm working.
Hey, I show up and, I go to share. I was invited to share this morning. I got 25 minutes to speak. And I told Graham, who's the MC in the meeting today, I go, Graham, I just did the math. So that means I have 2 minutes for every year in my life. No, I have less than that.
Yeah.
I have a minute, not even a minute, a half a minute. Yeah. I did the math wrong.
Well, but you don't remember. You don't. Your memory's not that good, so don't worry about it. It's like
math, right? I mean, I had 30 seconds for every year of my recovery. No way can I do that. But look, the point I was trying to make is that if I just swallow life whole, I don't digest it enough. I don't process it enough. I'm not able to then participate in my life. But if I chew it up, if I really am able to really let myself experience. And look, we talk about this all the time. So many of us have alienated ourselves from ourselves, meaning not wanting to feel what we feel. There's no way I can digest my experience.
Right.
It starts by being open to trying to embrace some of these things that I've avoided, that I've run from looking at, that I avoided facing about myself and my experiences, like I said before, and even in relationship with Tom, is being accessible, allowing the relationship to have an impact on me. Now, before I didn't do that because I wouldn't know how to manage a relationship if it had that much intimacy. So I had to shut down my accessibility. Don't need to do that, thank God, one day at a time. Today, I don't need to do that like I did today before. And with that spawns the kind of relationships we've been having through these podcasts. And
yep. And I thank you guys for being an important part of my support system.
Me too. Me too. I'll tell you, Tom, this thing that we started a year ago when COVID started, and we started to sit down, and then we invited Patrick in, and then we started to do that Thursday night meeting, which, you know, you were supporting me every step of the way with every one of these things, man. It's really meant a lot to me. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I am looking forward to you and I and hopefully Patrick too, getting on the road, getting out and doing some stuff when in person.
We're getting closer to that. We just got to get past this next little bump in this COVID thing, and hopefully we'll do that and get on our way. So we'll see everybody next week, and we'll pick up the questions you had. This was kind of a little detour today on celebrating my 50th and just kind of reminiscing with you guys about that and sharing some things about emotional sobriety. But next week,
it all fits in with your book, though, buddy.
Well, it all does. It really does, directly and indirectly.
I think next week we might visit waking up from our sleepwalking.
I like that. That's right on time.
All right. Well, happy 50th, Alan.
Call me Sunday morning to wake me up for that. So,
thank you.
Until next
guys.
time.
Peace.
Take care.
Tend your life, tend your myth. Cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human. Never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.